Hey, how's it going everyone? Dorian here again, and today I have another video for you guys, but it has to do with drums, and it just kind of seemed to be a good opportunity because I've had a few friends call me lately and ask what I would do if I was recording drums at home, and this is a very important question because the way you should be recording drums at home if you're a drummer is not the way you should be recording in a studio. And I think this is an important video to make because of the fact that a lot of people on YouTube and a lot of videos you see about recording drums are in big studios or small studios with very educated engineers and stuff like that. So the mic placement and what they do doesn't quite make sense, in my opinion, for a drummer that's just recording at home that maybe has like a 8-channel Focusrite or PreSonus or name your brand kind of thing and, 8 microphones. So with that being said, I want to go over everything that's going on here. I am recording this. This is a 1961 Leedy kit with a beautiful rewrap that belongs to a friend of mine named Tommy Rolson. And he was coming in to play some drums, and I thought this would be a great opportunity. So we're kind of going to ignore the rotos a little bit because that takes our track count way above 8. But I'm going to concentrate on, I think I actually have only 7 microphones on the drums. And if you have an 8-channel, you want an extra microphone for a rototom or some other accessory cymbal or accessory drum, you can do that, and I'll show you how to do that as well, like what I did with the rototoms, but he has 3, so I mic'd them individually. Anyway, getting on to what we're talking about. So I want to go over with you guys what I would do if I was a drummer. I had very little engineering experience, and I wanted a great drum sound in my home. So that's what this is going to be all about. So a lot of these concepts are going to be universal both in the studio and both what you would do at home, but there are going to be some differences, and I'll go over those when we get to them. But the first thing you need to really concentrate on is, do you know the part you're playing well? Are you happy with the part you're playing? Do your drums sound good? Are you comfortable in the atmosphere and the situation that you're in with your sticks, the way your drums are set up? Are your drums tuned? Do they sound good? Because those are some of the most important parts, because if it doesn't sound good when you play it, then there's no way it's going to translate to sounding good when you get into the recording studio. You're going to end up having to replace sounds, and I'm a little bit of a naturalist when it comes to that, so I don't like to do that unless I absolutely have to. And that typically comes with not poor miking, but just the way the drums sound. They're not really sounding good. So I like to get better sounds in and just use those and not have to compensate with samples and things. I'm going to be using these SE microphones. It comes from a drum pack made by SE Electronics, and it's kind of a typical drum set kit. It comes with 2 overhead condensers. It comes with 3 kind of tom mic things. It comes with a regular size microphone that I believe is the same as these, but it's, like a vocal size like you might use on snare or something like that. It also comes with a kick drum microphone, and that's it. So this is going to be the snare microphone. I'm going to use this because I only have 2 toms and I have 3 of these clip-on styles, and they're a little more low profile and easier to use. This microphone on the snare I have pointed kind of right at this outside ring. I don't know if you guys can see that. I moved it around. When I start with microphones, I start in a standard position, and I'm a big preacher of using your ears to make it sound better. So it takes a little while to get this going, but my starting point would have been this microphone kind of just above the rim, maybe like 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and pointed towards the center. Now with this snare, what happened when I was listening to that, it was a little ringy and a little too much attack for my personal preference for the sound we were going for. So what I do is, to lose some ring, I will bring the microphone up a little bit, and that will take out some ring and add a little bit of fatness as well. But I also found that there was a little too much snap going on, which we all love snap. Oh, try to get this back on here. But I ended up, instead of pointing at the center, I'm pointing towards this ring, and that really came to be the perfect sound for me. I got some snare sizzle that I want because, again, we don't have a ton of microphones, so I'm not using a bottom snare microphone. So at this position, I'm getting the fatness I want, getting a little less ring, I'm getting good attack, and I'm getting some sizzle from the snare. Also, I did use a couple moon gels as well. I don't like to go overboard on moon gels, but this snare kind of liked a couple moon gels. So I got one here and I cut a little fourth here. And the way I find where to put the moon gels, you know, to knock out ring, is I tap along the edges of the snare at the lugs, and sometimes one will stick out as ringing a little more. So in between, these two lugs kind of rang a little bit, so I put one here, and then there was just a little leftover ring that I didn't like on here. Given the snare still has ring and it still sounds natural, but that's what I decided to go with on this one. Tom mic placement is very similar, so I start in about the same spot, about the rim, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches up. With this one, I did not like what we were getting because this is a 12-inch snare. It's 12-inch tom, and it actually has a lot of boom to it. And it sounds a lot closer frequency-wise to a floor tom, which is great, but I was getting a little too much of that boominess because when I typically start miking toms, I actually try and get a little more boom out of them. So I had this a little higher originally and pointed towards the edge for more boom. So to get a little more attack out of it and still have some of that boom, I aimed it towards the center and I lowered it just a little bit. This floor tom over here, similar situation. I started with the very kind of higher boom sound on the outside, a little more of that low end resonance. And this was having a little too much resonance, so I ended up pointing it about to here and raising it up a little bit. And I'm happy with that sound. And let's move on to the kick drum. All right, now time for the kick drum. And the kick drum is very important to me because it's one of the most important parts of a mix, especially when it comes to rock music. So I like to get this exactly right, so I spend a lot of time on it. This is the SEV kick. It comes with the microphone pack, and I have it set on just your classic settings. There's nothing special about it. It does have some settings that scoop it or bump certain things, but I like it pretty flat because I want the natural sound of the drum, and if I need to do EQ or compression afterwards, which I will a little bit to make it sound better, but I don't go crazy with that kind of stuff. So this microphone with the kick drum, the inside mic, the first thing I do before I put the microphone in is I actually sit here. It kind of hurts your ears a little bit sometimes, especially if you have a hard hitter drum, but I want to hear what the kick drum sounds like. Is it muffled enough? Is it, you know, too muffled and I'm not getting enough, you know, resonance from it? So that's a big thing that plays in for what you're trying to get. Now, when I start with the kick drum mic, I typically start the one that goes inside the sound hole. I typically start with the front of the mic, the business side of the mic, really even with the kick drum head itself, and then I slowly push it in depending on what I want. The more out it is, the more low end you're gonna get, and the more in it is, the more high end snap you're gonna get. And if you want a lot of snap, you can put it in there pretty far, and then about halfway is when I'll stop, and then start aiming it at the beater, and that will start getting a lot of snap. Now, I do talk about using limited microphones, and in this situation, this is a snare, rack tom, floor tom, kick. So I have one extra mic I can do to still stay at 7 microphones, and instead of the bottom snare, I'm a big outside kick person. And this is a Warm Audio WA47 Junior, very affordable microphone. It works great on the outside of kick drums, and I love it. With these microphones, we don't have to worry about phasing too much. They're pretty close, and if there is a little bit of phasing issues, again, you can use your waveforms on your computer, but I just kind of really use my ears a lot of the time because even if something's a little out of phase, it can still sound really good. And sometimes if something's completely out of phase, it can sound cool for some reason. But I typically use my ears. If it sounds off to me, then I'll look at the waveform to make sure I'm not crazy. But a lot of times I can tell if the phasing's off just because we're losing a lot of information, and then I'll just hit the phase button and flip it and see if it works, and a lot of times that fixes it. So this microphone's here. I like it because it picks up a lot of low-end resonance. It gives a low-end punch kind of thing too as well, and I can worry more about getting some snap from this microphone and not worry too much about losing low end if it gets the kind of snap I want, and then I can have this for my low end. So that's the kick drum. All right, everyone, now let's talk about drum overheads. And you may be looking at these saying, aren't I supposed to be doing a spaced pair? Aren't I supposed to have some room mics out there? Am I supposed to have the mono room mic? Am I supposed to have the microphone in the middle that's picking everything up? What about those guys that have the microphones over their shoulders? And all that stuff is great. If you are a studio engineer or you're very educated in phase relationships, you have a ton of channels, then awesome, have fun, go crazy, have a blast. But this video is for the average drummer that is not an experienced recording engineer, that just wants great sounds that they don't have to worry too much about, and it's easy for them to throw and go. With that being said, the reason why I'm using an XY pattern here is because both of these microphones capsules are right next to each other, or diaphragms. So no matter where I move these mics, if I decide I want to move them over here, if I decide I want to move them over here, whatever, they're always going to be in phase. I can bring them down, I can bring them up. They're always going to be in phase with each other. The only thing that I would say really worry about is making sure these microphones, which is one at a whole because they are in phase together, are in phase with the snare drum microphone. A lot of times you can do that by ear, but again, when I was talking about the kick drum microphone, you can pull up the wave files and make sure the troughs and the peaks are lining up together. Or if they're exactly opposite, you can just hit the phase button and there you go. When I started putting these up, these are the SE8 microphones, by the way, from the drum mic kit. They are hypercardioid or supercardioid small diaphragm mics. I had them pointed in a perfect standard XY pattern, center drum kit pointed left and right. When I listen to those, because I do listen, I don't just put up mics and then just go hit record. When I listened to them back when Tommy was playing, I noticed that I was getting way too much hi-hat, which these are older and they do sound a little darker, a little more pleasant, but they are A-customs and they are very loud. So sometimes that can be an issue in recordings. On top of that, I have this 21-inch Zildjian medium ride as well, which is also a very loud ride. And then I have this small little splash trash kind of cymbal thing here, which is very quiet. So originally, when I had the microphones in the standard XY pattern, I was getting way too much hi-hat, which was dwarfing this cymbal. I was also getting way too much of this cymbal. None of this. This sounded good, but was still a little light, and the ride was too loud. So this microphone, I pointed towards the outside edge right here about halfway through the cymbal. And then with this microphone, I actually aimed it exactly towards the edge of the splash right here. What that did is that helped this become a little more prominent in the mix. It actually evened up both of these as well since it's pointed exactly between them. And since it's raised up more pointing this way, I don't have too much ride cymbal anymore. It still cuts through, it's still articulate, just like the hi-hat, but everything cymbal-wise is a lot more balanced now. And that's what we want because we want to get the best sound in that we can, so we have to do the least amount of work afterwards because it can be time consuming, it can cause headaches, and not only that, but the less EQ and less compression or whatever you use, the more natural the drum kit's gonna sound as well. I did put mics on the rototoms, which if you have an accessory microphone, so if we're using 7, if you have another tom, one more tom than he does, then you're out of channels. But if you have another microphone free and you want to do another accessory cymbal or an accessory drum or a rototom or a popcorn snare or whatever, you can do that as well. Just use the same miking techniques that I showed you to get the best sound that you can. If you look at the rototoms, I actually have them mic'd under the rototoms because of the fact that the rototoms have a lot of smack and they don't have a lot of resonance, and they're not as loud sometimes as some of the other stuff, so this shields the microphone from a lot of other things. Still has a lot of attack, but not quite so much smack to where it doesn't sound like a drum, so it actually sounds like a drum now, and that's what I got. So stay tuned, here comes Tommy. All right, awesome. I love recording Tommy. He's an amazing drummer. He's got great sounding drums. And it just goes to show you that you just need some simple miking techniques to record at home and make it sound good. If you have a good sounding drummer and good sounding drums, which should be you if you're recording, you're not going to have to do much. A little bit of EQ, a little bit of compression goes a long way. Obviously, in this song, I'm not putting it in a mix right now, so I have a lot more leeway with compression and EQ. I don't have to do a lot to make the drums stick out and sound good. But overall, I've got a little bit. If you guys want more tips on compression and EQ for drums, I can do that. I'm sure there's a million videos on YouTube about that as well. But for the most part, I have everything kind of dialed in pretty slim, and then what you're hearing compression-wise most part is going to be the master bus compressor, which is an SSL plugin that is cheap. Anybody can do it. I think I have the Waze version. They all sound great to me. I can't hear much of a difference, to be quite honest. It matters anyway. So if you like what you saw here, like and subscribe. If you have any questions for me, leave them in the comments and I'll hit you back as soon as I can. And then if you hated what I did and you think I'm an idiot, then blow up my comments too. I'd love to hear from you. I guess that's all I got, and hope to see you guys soon.